Hello there. Welcome to COVID-19's Careers Advice webinar. This is one of 6 webinars that we'll be hosting, looking at how COVID-19 has affected the job market and how to overcome the new normal. So today what we're going to be doing is having a little look at careers options that are out there for when you leave school, for when you've finished your A-levels or your level 3 courses, and then what happens if you've lost your job or you want to reskill and try a new career. So we're going to have a little look at what options are out there for doing anything of those skills. So we already know that COVID-19 has affected the world astronomically. It's also affected our job market astronomically as well. Some people have lost their jobs and some people are looking for their first role during lockdown, which can seem monumental. It's hard enough to try and find a job whilst the world is at the normal pace, but trying to find one in this new normal can be quite difficult. Some roles have been lost entirely, some have moved online, and it can be hard to know where to go for that high quality careers advice. And that's what we hope to provide you with today, all of your options so you can make some informed choices. So it can be really hard to know where to go next, and we do appreciate that. And we will be happy to help you one-to-one and support you in finding out what would be right for you to do next. So today we're going to be looking at the career options. Now, career options do depend on age, unfortunately, but what we're going to be looking at is what you can choose post GCSE, so between the ages of 16 to 18, post A-level or level 3 courses, so that would be our 18 plus level, and looking at what you can do once you've left university or you've decided that university or what you've done isn't for you and you want to return back to learning. So there's lots of options out there dependent on what you want to do. So the options that we're going to be looking at first of all are our 16 to 18s, and they include going to a sixth form school to carry on doing your A-levels or your international baccalaureates, going to a sixth form college to do your vocational learning, your technical learning, your BTECs or your T-levels, looking at apprenticeships and how apprenticeships will work, and also looking at traineeships and internships. When we get to our 18 plus level, we're going to have a little look at a university degree. We're going to have a little look at the pros and cons of a gap year, distance learning, apprenticeships again, internships and what they involve, going straight into employment, and joining the forces, which again is not for everybody, but is also a valid career option too. If you decide that you want to reskill or you've returned to education after a break, we've got looking at FE colleges for vocational learning or returning to university as a mature learner. So first of all, we're going to have a little look at our 16 to 18 options. What happens once you finish your GCSEs? Now, there's a wide range of options, as it shows here, of what you can do for your A-levels or for your post-GCSE levels. There's so much you can do. You've got your traditional A-levels, which most people tend to have a little look at, which is a good option, but it's not your only option. You've got T-levels and technical and vocational courses, and you've got your apprenticeships. Now, none of those other options are less than A-levels. That's what I tend to find with parents. They tend to say that A-levels are the best way to go, and it's not always the case. It's dependent on you and what you'd like to do. If you don't know what you'd like to do when you leave school, that's also absolutely fine. You can absolutely swap and change all of these options here. So you don't have to be fixed in a certain career path. There's no shame in retraining. There's no shame in trying something and not enjoying it. I've also done that myself. So there's no shame in doing something and not enjoying it and wanting to do something else. There's a big culture, particularly in the UK, that if you fail GCSEs, well, quote unquote, fail GCSEs or get low grades, if you fail A levels or get low grades on A levels, that you're a failure. And that is definitely not the case. It's just that possibly A levels and GCSEs weren't the right route for you. And that happens quite often. So never feel any shame about looking into non-traditional routes into education. All education routes are valid. I swear that is the absolute way to be. But we are going to have a little look at A levels because they tend to be where a lot of misinformation tends to come in. So as your schools, colleges may have told you, A levels are what most universities tend to ask for if you want to progress to university. We've also got here another option known as an international baccalaureate. And these are subject-specific qualifications that you study over 2 years that will lead to further education. They're normally assessed by examinations, but in the new COVID world, we don't know if examinations will still carry on as we know them. So we can't say whether examinations will be what comes forward, but at the moment, they're our gold standard for grading our A levels and our IBACs. Our IBACs are international qualifications. They're recognised by all EU countries and other countries surrounding in Europe. And what they're for is for training and studying outside of the UK. So if you wanted to go abroad and study abroad, they would probably be a better qualification rather than A levels. But A levels are also recognised universally as a gold standard for education. So what do you need to take A levels? So normally you do need fairly good GCSEs. And I say good as in that we need at least 5 GCSEs graded 9 to 4. If you have below those, they're still valid, but you might be better going down a different educational route. You need normally a 5 or a level 6 in a subject that you want to study, particularly for maths and sciences. They tend to be a little bit higher. I've known some schools ask for a level 7 in maths and a level 7 for physics, if you're taking triple physics or triple science. But they do vary from school to school. So what the best option is, if you're considering the A-level route, is to contact your local government, your local council or your local authority. If you Google A-levels, if you Google sixth form schools or 16 plus options, each local authority should have that information on their website. They should have a list of schools offering those qualifications and how to contact them. And I do recommend when searching for A-levels, make sure that you go to schools open days. Then normally around the October, November period for most schools up and down the country. So get that research done early if you think A-levels or transferring schools to do A-levels is the route for you. So what are they for? They're typically for if you're considering to go to university. Most higher education courses ask for A-levels or a combination of A-levels, but they do accept BTECs, they do accept T-levels, and they'll be accepting T-levels more in the next few coming years, so past 2020, 2021. If you're not sure about the career or job that you want to do, A-levels are quite a good way of trialing different education for certain job types. But I do try and recommend that you take a good mix of A-levels that are specific to a certain pathway. So if you think that you might want to work in psychology in the future, so you might want to be a counsellor, a social worker, you want to perhaps go into medicine or be a psychiatrist, something along the lines of sociology, psychology, maybe biology or English would be a really, really good fit. So your A-levels don't fix what you do in the future, but if you have a kind of career path in mind, taking certain ones together would be a really good option. If you have no idea at all, it's absolutely fine to take what you enjoy at school. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But try and keep your choices sensible, is my only advice. I've seen lots of universities reject students because their mix of A levels is a little bit too out there to make sense. So if you're taking, say, physics with, let's say, a humanities subject like history and maybe PE, it may be a little bit less likely of going into medicine than you would do if you took biology, chemistry, and mathematics, let's say. So try and keep your options open for A levels, but try and keep an idea of a career path in mind, whether you're technical, whether you like the idea of engineering, one of those STEM subjects, going down the science route with one of those is really good. If you're more humanities based, something with psychology, sociology, if you want to work with people. If you're more creative, maybe English, arts, those kind of things would be a very good mix of subjects. If you're interested in more creative media, maybe arts with media studies, it's dependent on you. But just find out what you enjoy and help that shape your career options. So what can you do after A level? I hear this a lot from parents and a lot from students. So the traditional route is to go to university, but that's not the only route that's available. So you can keep your options open. So after your A levels, you could take a gap year and decide what you want to do. We're going to talk about gap years as we go further on in our slides. We can look for employment at this point. There's still quite a few jobs out there that will take you at A level, and we'll talk about other routes into employment, including apprenticeships in just a second. Or, as it says here, we can go straight in for an apprenticeship and go from there. Apprenticeships are now becoming more of a popular option for students because they're now being firmed up to almost be at a degree level. With a degree apprenticeship, you will earn a formal degree in your particular subject area. It will be specific to a particular subject area, more so than a normal degree, but you will still have a degree level standard in your education. So T-levels, BTECs, technical and vocational qualifications. These get a terribly bad rap in education as being the softer option. I don't agree with that at all. So BTECs, technical and vocational qualifications are as valid as A levels, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. It might be a less conventional route, but it is still a route into employment. So these are a really, really good way if you're more hands-on. So these are for people that enjoy being more hands-on, being more practical, rather than just fact learning. So BTECs are what we use at the moment. There are major vocational qualifications that most colleges will offer, and some schools will offer these as well. They're available for a wide range of sectors, including business, engineering, IT, and they also include things like building work, motor mechanics, hairdressing. The choice is endless. And BTECs are nationally recognised as a form of technical learning. So they are accredited, they are a full qualification and not a soft option whatsoever. Now, BTECs can range from different levels depending on the skills that you bring in to your vocational learning. So they range from being right at the beginning of an educational journey, whether you've got no GCSEs whatsoever. So these could be our entry level or functional skill level learning, all the way up to level 7, which is equivalent to a postgraduate level study. And they come in all different shapes and sizes to fit around you, the type of work you want to do, and other studies as well. So there are absolute thousands of BTECs that you could take. There are over 2,000 registered BTECs along 16 different sectors. And I've included a link here to have a little look at a list of qualifications that are available as BTECs. So once you've completed your BTEC, there's a variety of options that are available to you. So you can carry on progressing into a particular job if that's what you want to do. You can go and study a new qualification. So some universities will accept BTECs and vocational studies, level 3, 4 and 5 studies. But again, it's a bit of research with the university itself to see what they would accept. So if you've got a particular career path in mind, whether you want to go, say, into criminology, let's say, it'd be worth researching criminology in other universities and seeing what kind of qualifications they're looking for. So doing that early on can also give you a hint of which career path would be good for you. At the end of a BTEC, you've got the opportunity to take an apprenticeship. So taking an apprenticeship is also quite a good option to do. But if you've taken a lower level of BTEC, you also have the option of continuing your studies. So if you, say, for instance, took a level 2 BTEC study, you could then progress to a level 3 or even to a level 4 if those courses are available. So these courses can be mixed and matched. They can also be mixed and matched with A-levels, as it says here. So you get a mixture of different qualifications dependent on you. So the BTEC levels are changing. So they are slowly being phased out for a more holistic type of education. These are called T-levels, and these are more robust than our BTECs. So our T-levels are nationally recognised qualifications, just like our BTECs are, but they're equivalent to 3 A-levels. So you would need to take 1 T-level to be equivalent to 3 A-levels that we would normally study. Again, the courses are over for 2 years, and you'll be taught the skills similarly to our BTECs, certain types of workplaces, training, and so on. But what makes our T-levels different is the fact that we will have placements as a standard, at least 45 days in your course. So they're a bit like our apprenticeships, but they're less intense than an apprenticeship. So we will have a placement of at least 45 days in a workplace, and the rest of the time you will be in college, you'll be off-site learning. So traineeships. So traineeships are a middle ground. They are something you can progress into if you're unsure about education and you didn't do as well at your GCSEs as you would have hoped. This isn't a soft option by any means. Education by any step or any pace is still valid education. But a traineeship is what you would do between leaving school and progressing possibly into an apprenticeship. So this can be a really, really good period of time to focus on you. The only downside to a traineeship is that they're not paid. But you can be in a traineeship for a year, get yourself career ready, and carry on to a paid role via an apprenticeship or going through to vocational learning. So a traineeship is an education and training program with work experience and designed to get people between the ages of 16 to 24 work ready. So it's designed to get you ready to either go into an apprenticeship or to progress you into other courses that will provide you the right skills for that particular work. So people that can apply are those that have little to no work experience or are motivated to work. And if you're motivated to work, that is half the battle with a traineeship. So you'll find a lot of organisations will accept people to work in a traineeship, let's say, as we've got here in front of us, in a bakery. They'll support you with retraining, reskilling, show you certain experiences that you would get in a bakery. And being motivated to work is half the battle. to be honest. If you approached many employers with the motivation to work, it will be quite hard for those employers to say no. I'm not going to say that they'll all say yes, and be prepared for a lot of closed doors in your face. That happens with any kind of education or any kind of journey. But keeping that motivation, keeping your spirits high, and being motivated to start from the bottom and work your way up is really, really good skill to have. That resilience to push back is a really, really good skill to have. I could tell you lots about myself and lots about resilience and being pushed down, but I'll save that for another webinar. Being aged between 16 and 24 is one of our criteria here. It can be extended to 25 if you've got an education and health care plan put in place and you're qualified up to level 3. So up to less than 5 GCSEs at grades 9 to 4. As I mentioned, a traineeship isn't a job. It's not a formal job. And employers aren't required to pay you for your work experience placement, but they can help out with things like transport and meals whilst you're doing your work experience with them. The only upside to this is that if you are on benefits and if you're not working, if you're aged between 16 and 24, you would be entitled to benefits such as universal credit. If you're doing a traineeship as part of your universal credit benefit, you're entitled to your benefit will still remain the same. It would be only when you'd progress to your apprenticeship that then your universal credit benefits may change. I'm not part of the Department for Work and Pensions, so I can't comment much more about that. But again, having a little look on the government website will give you lots more information about that. Traineeships are free, they're government subsidised, so you won't have to pay to join a traineeship anywhere. And if employers or traineeship organisations tell you you need to pay, that is not an official traineeship, and avoid that if you can. So from your training provider, so normally with a traineeship, you might go back to college to do SIP functional skills, GCSEs and so on. You'll be provided with lots of help to prepare you for work. So helping you write your first CV, which we can also help you with here. That's going to be one of our other webinars. Talk about what to experience in a workplace, but you'll also see that in your work experience. Help with improving your English, maths and digital skills if you need it. So it's really handy if you want to upskill. They'll also provide you with sector focus of vocational learning to prepare you to start your apprenticeship or your BTECs, whatever you need, and you'll get a recognition for that learning. So you'll have a formal traineeship qualification that you can put on your CV with a certain college or a certain employer or both, that will be recognised on your CV as an education qualification. So traineeships are not a soft option, but they're a more gentle option to get you ready to go back into work. So these can be particularly useful if you decide to take a break, or that you have a break in your educational journey for whatever reason and want to get back into the swing of things. So from your employer, so from your employer's side, you will get a work placement of at least 70 hours. So it can either be in one fell swoop, a full-time placement, or it can be broken down into several part-time placements. So it's pretty much dependent on the employer themselves, and they will have a conversation with you about that and how that will work for you. You'll also have an interview for an apprenticeship if there's one available, but if not, you'll be provided with a feedback and an exit interview with all of the skills that you need to work on before you start an apprenticeship. Your program will be completely tailored to meet your needs. and prepare you for what your local businesses will be looking for. So if you're working at a local bakery in town, you will know the skills that other local bakeries will be looking for, and you can prepare yourself to join an apprenticeship as a catering student, as a baker student, and get yourself ready for that kind of apprenticeship. So they're a really, really good way of getting yourself back into the swing of getting into your first role. Now, apprenticeships, they've had a lot of bad press over the last 10, 20 years. They're always seen as the soft option, and they are not. They are a really, really good way of getting into a career that's very specific, that you'll get very specific qualifications for, and you'll be earning a wage. So that's what a lot of my students find quite interesting about apprenticeships, is that apprenticeships pay. And it can be a really good way if you're dependent on money, or if you worry about getting into student debt. And we'll talk about student debt when we get into looking at our 18+ options, because it's not as scary as what you think. So an apprenticeship is a real job. It's a job where you'll learn, you'll gain skills and qualifications, and you'll have a contract for employment and have full holiday leave, sick pay, and so on. By the end of your apprenticeship, you'll have skills and knowledge required for your chosen career and have a formal qualification at the end of it. Now, apprenticeships can take between 1 to 6 years to complete, depending on where you start or where you want to progress to. And the money that comes for paying for your apprenticeship, and I will be honest, it's not massive amounts of money. It's not minimum wage, it's slightly less, but that money comes from your employer directly, and it also comes from contributions from government. So government will help subsidise your employer to take you on for an apprenticeship. So there's an incentive there for the employer to take you on. There's various different types of apprenticeships that you can undertake dependent on your skills that you start with. That can include an intermediate apprenticeship. So that would be directly once you've left doing your GCSEs, or if you've got a few GCSEs, the grades 9 to 4. An advanced apprenticeship or high level apprenticeship, that would be where the apprenticeship would come in if you've got high GCSEs or some A levels. And a degree apprenticeship is what it says on the tin. It's a degree. So you'll be working, you'll be bringing a wage in, but you'll also be studying for a degree. So these can be a really, really good way of getting a degree without that student loan. So the entry requirements for apprenticeships, they do vary, and they are quite competitive. So making yourself into the best candidate possible is a must here. And that's where our programs looking at careers advice and support will come into play. We'll work with you to look at how to bring up a really good CV, how to write a cracking personal statement, how to write or pick apart a apprentice role description to show them that you're the best candidate for the job. So making yourself the best candidate possible can be hard to do, but that's why we're developing the skills here to help you do so. So you might be asking, how do apprenticeships work? Well, apprenticeships will be delivered asynchronous with your work. That means that you'll go in day to day, do your work like you would do with a normal job, but you might have days off where you go back to college, where you go back to a training provider where they'll provide skills for you, or you might have to do it in your evenings, at your weekends, in your free time. Again, it depends upon the apprenticeship and the apprenticeship provider that you go with. And making sure that you research that up front is a real must. When it comes to apprenticeships, researching early is a real must as well. Apprenticeships are being advertised throughout the year, unlike schools where we have GCSEs, A levels, and universities, where the catchment is only a few months of the year. With apprenticeships, they're being advertised throughout the year. So I have had students in the past that have started A-levels, not enjoyed them, found an apprenticeship they like, and dropped out in their A-levels to go and do something else. And again, there's no shame in doing that. This is a really, really lucrative way of training and skilling yourself up. So you can start an apprenticeship at any particular stage in your career. Like I was saying, you can start when you've finished your GCSEs. You can start if you're halfway through A-levels, if you've finished A-levels, even if you've had a degree. So you can start an apprenticeship no matter what your educational background or your age is. And if you think that you might need more support when applying for an apprenticeship, or you think an apprenticeship isn't the point that you want to start at, a traineeship is perfect to get you apprentice ready. So it will provide you with more skills, more work experience to get you ready to apply for an apprenticeship. So you can even work with us at GlamSci, and we will help you make the best of yourself and get you apprentice ready as well. So that's not an issue either. Now we're coming along to our 18+ options. So typically these happen once you've finished your A-levels or your level 3 qualifications. So there's lots of things that you can do depending on what kind of career path you've got in mind. Again, if you don't have a career path in mind, there's no shame in trying lots of different things before coming back to the career path for you. Myself, I was always fixed on science. My career path that I decided to choose for myself was looking into medicine. I had applied to university. I was getting ready to go to university to start a medical degree. I was doing work experience, and I decided I didn't like it. And I decided that I cancelled my UCAS application. And I took a gap year, and I worked in a school, and I ended up staying in that school for quite some time whilst I reskilled and redid some of my qualifications. And then I decided to do distance learning. So I went back to the university route, but not traditional universities. So there's no shame in chopping and changing what you're doing. So there's no shame in what you want to do. It's whatever works best for you. So university, this is where I tend to get asked a lot about. So I've seen lots of university students pass through university, apply to university. We've worked on lots of personal statements, lots of UCAS applications. We know lots about university levels. And it's good for some people, particularly if you want the experience of university. But for some other people, university is not the best way to go. For myself, it wasn't. And I wanted to do something different. But universities are generally the pathway that most people tend to go down. Now, when you go to university, you'll be going to study a degree. And a degree is a formal type of education that takes 3 to 4 years to complete. It's specific to a certain pathway. So things like medicine, law, chemistry, psychology, and so on. Some can be a mix of courses. So you might get a degree with something else into it as well. So psychology with counselling, psychology with forensics. You can get mixtures of degrees as well, but they'll give you really good skills for a specific type of career in mind. If you've got an idea that you'd like to go into research, so you'd like to perhaps be the next, I don't know, Albert Einstein, doing theoretical research, looking at possible cures for cancer, a degree is the main way into that. So what you'd be looking to do is academic research, and a degree is the best way to progress to academic research, to postgraduate education. So our degrees can lead to a master's or a PhD. A PhD is just a qualification where you can be called a doctor at the end of it. A master's is just another step up. It's like a level to a degree, essentially. So when you're studying your degree, you have a choice of what degree you want to take. And these aren't a hard and fast rule. So when it says a BA, Bachelor of Arts, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking an arty subject. It's just what they're called. So a BA can be in a science subject, it can be in English, it doesn't necessarily mean an art subject. Just as a BSc, a Bachelor of Science, isn't necessarily a science degree. It's just what universities use to discuss their different types of degrees. And none is better than the other. So I do recommend this. If you do go forward for a degree, making sure that you add summer work experience placements into your study is really, really important, because there's going to be a lot of graduates graduating with similar degrees of similar gradings, and you want to make yourself shine. So taking the opportunity to grow yourself as a person, to take on work experience placements, to volunteer and so on, really makes you a more well-rounded person. It shows your employer that you've got skills other than your academic ones, because anyone can study academic skills, but it's showing them that you are the right person for their particular role, that you've got the right interpersonal skills, you've got the right, what we call soft skills. So things like working well in a team, listening well, customer service skills, work experience placements, volunteering, sandwich degrees, research degrees, shows potential employers you've got those skills. So some employers can even offer sponsored degrees. So a bit like an apprenticeship, your degree is paid for you. And what you do in return is that once you've finished your degree, you then go and work for that particular employer. So it's a win-win scenario, because you're getting a free degree, you're getting a job at the end of it, and an employer is getting a really high-class quality candidate to bring into their workforce. So it's a win-win for everybody. So some employers do offer this, and it's making sure that you research your particular employer that you'd like to work with to see whether they offer them. Again, they can be quite competitive, so making sure that you make yourself into the best candidate possible is a real must, and we can help you with that. So if you do go into a university route, you don't have to take a full degree. There are other university courses that you can take, and they're slightly shorter. So you can take a HNC, you can take a certificate in higher education. They're equivalent to our first year of a degree course. You could then progress on to do a foundation degree or a HND, or something else that's equivalent, a diploma in higher education. They're normally equivalent to our second year, maybe our first and second year of our degree course. But the good thing about these courses is they've got lower entry requirements, but they're buildable. So if you go and join a university for a HNC and you want to then progress to do your second or your third year, you can just build that up because you're already there with that university. So it is very, very buildable. It's very stackable. So a gap year. I myself decided to take a gap year. It might be worth doing if you're unsure where to go next, whether you're unsure whether you want to go to university, whether you're unsure whether you want to go into an apprenticeship, or whether you want to go into employment entirely. So gap year normally is a time that you take out between your studies, often at the age of 18, but it can be done when you're older. And there's lots of things that you can do in your gap year. So in your gap year, you can make yourself a better candidate for a university, or you can do the normal things like traveling, working, volunteering, saving money up for university, and so on. So many people, when they want to take a gap year, still apply for university. On your UCAS application, there's a box that you can tick to say that you want to take a gap year, but you still want to have that place at university for the following year. So you've basically deferred. So you've taken a year out from your studies and you've deferred when you're going to start. The reason that that's quite a good thing to do is if you want to progress university, that having that placement already there is absolutely fantastic to just walk into. You don't have to apply when subsequent years could be a little bit more competitive. So taking that deferred option can be really, really good if university is quite likely for you. But there are lots of benefits to taking a gap year. So you can develop your transferable skills. You can raise your cultural awareness. You'll meet and work with lots of new people, so you can appreciate other cultures and other countries once we're able to travel after COVID. You can increase your confidence by taking a gap year. You can start to be more independent, particularly if you're traveling at all. So you learn to be more of your own person. You can start to learn new crafts. So if you're considering starting your own business, for example, you can start to learn how to craft. You can start to learn how to build up your own business. You can gain important work experience. So before you even started your university journey, you can start to build up your bank of experience to show future employers that I know what the workplace looks like. You can save money for university. Really, really good if university fees scare you. Now, university fees are seem really, really high, and they're quite high, 9,000 plus a year, and that's without accommodation, that's without food and bills, and it can work out to be quite costly. Now, with student debt really should be classified more as a tax rather than a loan. So the fees that you get, your student loan, your tuition loan, your maintenance loan, they do need to be paid back, but they get paid back when you're earning a certain amount of money. At the moment, the cap's being moved to £30,000 a year. So you have to be earning over £30,000 a year to pay back a percentage of your student loan. And it is a percentage, and it depends upon how much you earn. And it's only based on a percentage of above that criteria. So if you're earning £31,000 a year, you would only have to pay back the amount of student loan taxable on that £1,000, not the 30,000. So it's a bit like a tax break, really. So really, you get it taken out of your money before you even get your paycheck come through, and it's barely noticeable. Most people won't pay it back in full at all. It's only people that have a high graduate salary or have parents that help support their payments that they'll end up paying back most of the money. But for most people, they don't pay back their full student loans. And after 30 years from the date that you start your repayments, your student loan gets wiped off. So you won't have to pay after 30 years. Some might argue that you might be 21 and that means that you're going to be 51 and still paying it. But you can think of it as being like a tax contribution. So you're paying tax back for the education that you've had. So don't let student finance put you off when it comes to university. But taking a gap year to help pay for certain university costs, such as accommodation costs, food and bill costs that your student loan won't cover, is also a really, really good thing to do. So myself, when I took my gap year, I started working in a school. So I wanted to go down a teaching route. So I decided to get work experience in a school to make sure that was the right choice for me, which I did. After that first year, I then decided to work as an unqualified teacher / teaching assistant, and that helped supply the money that I saved up for university. So by taking a gap year, by taking some time out, you can be really, really sure that that particular career path is for you. And you can start to build up a bank of money that you can fall back on when it comes to living on your own for the first time, which can be quite scary. Another thing you can do with your gap year is improve your language skills, particularly again if you're traveling. The only downside to a gap year is that if your skills that you need for university are quite technical, for instance, a science degree, by taking that year out, you may forget some of the knowledge that you'd be expected to know as an undergraduate. So that's the only downside to a gap year. And plus you're adding on an extra year until you graduate. So instead of graduating at 21, 22, it wouldn't be until you were 22, 23. So those are things to consider if you want to graduate and get straight into work. Distance learning now. Again, a bit like apprenticeships, distance learning has got a really, really bad rap, but it's a really, really good way of learning and working at the same time. Again, I did distance learning because I wanted to keep working. I enjoyed working in schools and working in educational environments. So I took a distance learning degree to fit me. And that's what they're meant to be for. They're meant to be a type of learning route that is offered by universities. It's still a full degree. But instead of you going onto campus and going and enjoying a student lifestyle, you attend the same lectures, seminars, and so on from home. Sometimes you might be required to go onto a campus to study and to do some placements, but most of it will be done at home, and all of your work will be submitted online, apart from if you have to sit in the examinations. Unfortunately, if you don't like examinations and your course requires you to have them, you still may have to go in and sit an exam. So if you're not an exam fan, this may not be for you, but it's still a degree. Now, distance learning is a lot more flexible. So instead of studying for 3 years straight off the bat, it's more modular. You break it down into bite-sized modules worth a certain number of credits, a bit like how the American system works. So you'll have a certain number of credits per year that you can study. They can be 30, 60, or 120. 30 and 60 are classified as part-time learning. 120 is classed as full-time learning with the learning providers themselves. And you'll continue to build up those credits until you've got 360, and that is your honours degree done. So it's quite flexible, particularly if you've got circumstances that prevent you from being away from your family, prevent you from living on your own for whatever instance. So if you've got a full-time job, if you've got caring responsibilities, if you've got children, there's many ways that distance learning can benefit you. The only downside of distance learning, I've learned for myself, is that it can feel quite isolating. So making sure that you make the most of your student association, making the most of any links that you can make with other students that are also on your course are really valuable. So what you can study and who offers it. So with distance learning, just like with a normal university, you can study an undergraduate degree and a postgraduate degree. So you can still take your master's and your PhD via distance learning. The major provider of distance learning is the Open University. So the Open University is all done online from your own home. Arden University offers a more blended experience, so where you'll be doing some distance learning and some campus learning. Now, they don't offer the full range of degrees, but they do offer a really wide selection. So it's really worth, when you're looking at universities, if you're unsure or you want to commute from home, having a little look at distance learning might be quite interesting to do as well. Apart from the fact that you are working from home and that you can fit it around your work schedule or your other responsibilities, it has actually slightly lower tuition fees. So you wouldn't be paying the max 9,250 plus 9,000 degree levels. So they're normally a little bit cheaper because you haven't got to be on campus. You don't have access to, say, the labs. You don't have access to the art rooms, the other facilities. So they can afford for their degree courses to be lower. They're not any less rigorous. They're all accredited by external universities that work with them, but they can afford to be lower because they're not providing those online sites, or they're not online sites, they're not providing that on-campus site. So if you wanted to do a distance learning degree, they're open for anyone at any age. You can apply for them using student finance. So if you've not had a degree before, or if you've got a science degree, you can apply for a second science degree or a STEM degree using student finance. You can pay in installments, which is quite interesting. So because you're doing bite-sized modules, you pay as you go, you pay per module. So for instance, with my Open University degree, my modules for a 60 credit course is around about £3,000. And I would typically, because I'm working, would be that I would take one 60 credit module a year. So each year it costs me £3,000 or just above £3,000. It does vary per year per inflation, but it can make things a little bit more manageable if you can't apply for student finance for whatever reason. But majority of students that apply for distance learning can apply for student finance. It's just worth, again, going onto the government website, Googling student finance and making sure that you fit those criteria for student finance. So you can also get sponsored by an employer. So like with our degree learning, if you're sponsored by the employer, you pay nothing out, but the employer will pay for you to get your degree and take those skills into their workplace. And if distance learning does interest you, it's really, really worth putting in the research, looking at their websites and so on. If you wanted to apply for distance learning, you apply directly to the university. So you don't have to go through things like UCAS, pay for a UCAS application and apply to university. It's not as competitive. So normally you complete an application with them. They'll either accept it or reject it for whatever reason that they decide. And then you can go and start studying. So it's pretty much dependent on your previous skills and experience. But the Open University, and there's no plug here, it just happens to be what I know for myself, they ask for no formal qualifications when you start studying with them. So you don't have to have GCSEs, you don't have to have A-levels, you don't have to have an apprenticeship or BTEC. They will take you in, they'll start you on a fairly low level and they'll progress everyone up the same level. So if you've done GCSEs, it can be quite samey to start with, but it brings everyone to a level playing field and you can progress from there, which is quite a nice thing to do, particularly if you've taken an educational break. So apprenticeships again. So again, as you know, we can apply for apprenticeships for whatever level that we want. So if we did A-levels and we didn't progress as much as we would have liked, that we don't have the grades to go to a university, an apprenticeship again is another valid option. It's not the only option if you don't have the grades for university. If you have those grades but you'd prefer to avoid student loans, tuition loans and so on, apprenticeship is a really valid way of progressing. So you can do a higher apprenticeship if you've done A-levels or a level 3 course and you're not going to go to university. So you'll be training alongside earning a salary, like we said before. So you can do an apprenticeship that can lead to a higher level or even a degree level whilst you're working. With that apprenticeship, there's no fees to pay, so it's a realistic way of working without getting into debt. They can be really, really good if you've got a specific sector that you want to work in mind. So there's lots of sectors, lots of very technical jobs that the only route into them is an apprenticeship. So I was doing some research into apprenticeships for these slides, and I saw that a anesthesiologist that was working in a hospital theatre but wasn't a full anesthesiologist was an apprenticeship to do, and it was a degree apprenticeship. So I'd always thought that if you wanted to work in theatres and wanted to work alongside anesthesiologists, that you would need a degree in medicine for that. But there's an apprenticeship route for that as well. So it can be quite surprising looking at apprenticeships and seeing what's out there and doing that research. So it's a really, really good way of getting your foot into the door without getting yourself into debt. But there's a few things that we'll always need to consider. So as I mentioned with our apprenticeships before, apprenticeships are advertised throughout the year. So it's no good just looking at them from the end of your A-levels. It's really, really worth researching them for at least a full year before you leave school. If you're undecided about whether you want to take an apprenticeship or apply for university, it's always best to do both. So it's always best to research and apply for university. If, say, like myself, you decide that you've got an apprenticeship that you would absolutely love to do, it's your dream role, you can always decline university. You can always withdraw your application or make another one later on. It's absolutely fine to do. So there's lots of different apprenticeships available, like I said. Doing your research, finding out what's available near you, using the government website to research apprentices that are near you is a really, really good thing to do. If you don't have the relevant experience to do a higher apprenticeship, maybe your grades were slightly lower, doing an advanced apprenticeship can be done. So you can go back and almost not necessarily resit your A-levels, but reskill to an A-level level. But you'd possibly be able to complete it quicker than a 16-year-old because you've already progressed through those A-levels. So you'd be able to progress quicker through those that apprenticeship as well. But be warned, not all higher apprenticeship qualifications can be done in your chosen sector. So some might be just degree level. For example, the apprenticeship that I mentioned was a degree level one. So the entry requirements will probably be higher and some jobs won't offer them at all. So, for example, if you wanted to be a fully qualified doctor and not just an anesthesiologist, a degree would not be, an apprenticeship would not be for you. So do your research is my only advice here. And as we mentioned before as well, higher and degree apprenticeship opportunities are quite competitive. So make yourself shine. Really work hard, really Google and research how other people have got into their apprenticeship. Have a little look at possible examples of CVs, of personal statements, work with GlamSci, work with other organisations that can support you, and make yourself shine. Make yourself the best candidate you can be. So internships, these are quite interesting. You might do an internship whilst you're at university. You might decide to go in for an internship before you go to university or after university. So these are quite flexible. They're similar to apprenticeships, being that you'll go in and you'll work and you'll see the kinds of environments that you'll be working in. But like traineeships, some internships are not paid. So you're only going in for the experience. They can be fairly short, so they're not like apprenticeships in the sense that they're happen for a long period of time. They're normally up to normally about a year, maybe a year and a half. But they are really, really good ways of seeing the work environment that you'll be going into. So they are a form of work experience or work placement with a particular company. And there's different types of internships, and finding out what type of internship that you'll have is really important. So we've got things like work shadowing. So shadowing a more senior member of staff and seeing how they run their day-to-day routines. Summer schemes. So working throughout your summer, working throughout a sandwich year, just to see if a particular company is right for you. And these can be really lucrative to do, particularly if you make a name for yourself with that company. The company's more likely to hire you if you've been on a scheme with them previously. And just general work placement. So they look more like work experience. They give you a taste of what it's like to work in your chosen profession. And as it says here, it gives you a more it gives you more experience and makes you a more rounded candidate when applying for more roles. So as I said, the length of our internship can really vary. They are fixed over a certain time frame, so normally a few weeks or months, but smaller companies can offer shorter internships depending on their needs. So that's absolutely fine if a small company offers you a 2-week internship. That's still valid as a 6-month one from a larger company. So as I mentioned as well, the downside to internships is that they can be unpaid. And again, making sure that you know this upfront before you apply to them is really, really a good thing to do. So it's typically when there's a high competition for placements that they're normally unpaid. So for the roles where you need a lot of work experience, where they're leading to fairly high paid jobs and they're competitive, they're normally unpaid. So keeping an eye out for that is also a really good thing to know too. So employment. So you might decide that education and carrying it on is not for you, and that's absolutely okay. So if you get to the end of your A-levels, you can apply for a job. So you might want to work rather than staying full-time education. You have to progress to A-levels or vocational levels or an apprenticeship before you can get to employment. So you need to progress up until 18 plus before you can leave school, education or training to become employed. And even though jumping straight into the job market sounds really, really scary, there are still plenty of jobs out there. I know myself that I've seen plenty of my students leave school and apply for roles and be successful. So it's about making yourself a really good candidate. So putting together a really, really strong CV, getting work experience, having a one-on-one with someone to look at your interview technique is absolutely vital for applying for your first role or reapplying for another role post COVID-19. So if you have a part-time job whilst you're studying, it can lead to possibly a full-time role dependent on the role that you're applying for, and it will give you a really good time to find out whether that would be something you could do post A-level or level 3s. So asking your employer, could they take you on as a full-time employee, is always a really, really good thing to do. So don't knock part-time work. It's always a really good foot in the door and allows you to progress upwards. So making sure that you know that if you apply for a job and you accept it and you work, that education and training is still there for you. It will still exist for you and you can return to it later, which is what we're going to have a little look at in the next few slides. If you're job hunting and you've got a particular role in mind, making sure you do a lot of research about that company before you go to interview is a must. Most companies will not accept you unless you know the bare minimum about the company you're applying to work for. So, for example, if someone was applying to work with GlamSci, we would expect them to know the bare minimum of GlamSci and how it works. So we'd expect them to know why we were set up, our mission statement, basically a lot of the information that you find on our website and some of our documents. So doing the same thing for other companies is a real must. And working for yourself is also a valid career option. Again, I can talk about this because I set up my own charity and ran my own charity for a number of years. And it's not an easy way of carving yourself a career. It's hard work, you put in a lot of hours, but when it works and your business is taking off and you're getting the bookings coming in, you're getting your product going out if you produce a product, it's really gratifying. It can be more gratifying than working for somebody else. So if you've got a skill, if you've got a business idea that you can put into use and be paid for, then working for yourself, self-employment is also a really good career to go down. And again, the government website will talk you through setting up your own business, setting up your own organisation or charity, how tax works for that, and so on. So again, I'm not a member of the Department of Work and Pensions, so I can't advise you too much on taxes. So one of the last things that I've mentioned here for post 18 is joining one of the armed forces. So that can be the Army, the Navy, the RAF, all of those kind of organisations. So they require people that are fit and have an aptitude for the armed forces. So you'd need to be able to pass a fitness test, an aptitude test, and an interview, and show them that you've got the right kinds of skills that they're looking for. They're very, very specific skills, but if you have them and you're trainable, they will take you in and they will work with you and get the best out of you. There's a reason that the Army's tagline is "Be the best," because they expect the best and they train the best. So you don't need a degree or even A-levels to join the armed forces, but again, you could progress up depending on your level. So you can join the Army as an officer and progress up to do a degree in medicine, for instance, and become a medical officer. So making sure that you know your pathway through the forces is also a really, really good thing to do, and that you can progress that way. You know which way you want to go from there, and you apply yourself for it. So if you join the forces, if you join the Army, the Navy, the RAF, you can still progress to university level. You could take a degree with them, and you can also apply to them as a graduate. So they can support you after you've graduated, or get you to a point where you do graduate and be a full member of the armed forces. So there's lots of training routes. All you need to do is go onto their websites and research them. So making sure that when you do apply to them, that you've got lots of extracurricular activities, that you're showing that you can volunteer, you can work well with the community, you've got those teamwork skills, those listening skills. They are absolutely fantastic skills for applying for any of these kind of roles. So doing things like scout work, doing a Duke of Edinburgh, being a cadet, being in police cadets, all of those kind of things are really, really good if you're interested in joining the armed forces. So students can get involved at university with university levels of the armed forces, so the officer training corps, the naval units, the air squadrons, and you can learn lots about the armed forces without committing yourself to joining after you finished your degree. So there's plenty of ways you can find out whether becoming a member of the armed forces is for you. But generally speaking, you'd need to make sure that you're fighting fit. So unfortunately, if you have certain health conditions, joining the forces isn't an option. But do contact them and let them tell you whether they could accept you or not, because many of their roles doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be on a battlefield with a gun in hand. They also have lots of roles that are office-based, particularly within the reserved army, and they can point you to what would be a best fit for you. So don't think that if you're not fighting fit, 6 foot tall, running about in your Speedos, that joining the armed forces isn't for you. You can join them at any age between the ages of 16 to between 35 to 39, and you can progress up with them like you would do a normal job. So you can work with them to 50, 60 in a more of an office-based role. So they are a really, really good way of becoming employed, working for a particular cause, working together, working as a team, those kind of things. So when you are applying, making sure that you've got really, really good skills like public speaking, which is one that often doesn't get thought about when applying for the armed forces, but there'll be plenty of opportunity to do public speaking is a must. And making sure you've got a really good knowledge of current affairs, particularly foreign and at home when it comes to defence related issues. So knowing what's going on in the UK, how our army works, how government deploys our army, how armies are being used in other countries, any kinds of crisis or aid that needs to be done in other countries tends to be done by the armed forces. So all of those kind of things, keep abreast of, and it will really impress if you progress to the point of interview. So really, really good things there. So 19 plus options. So as I said, not knowing what you want to do or trying something, not enjoying it is an absolute fine thing to do within your educational journey. It's then knowing what to do next and not becoming disheartened. You possibly hear lots of people who say that, oh, you've not progressed, you're a bit of a failure, or you could have done better with your life. Don't listen to them. What you do with your life is totally up to you. And it's up to you to find what you want to do in life. You shouldn't be making other people happy. The only one you should make happy is you. So if you decide that you wanted to take some time out, but you wanted to come back, we still have options that we can look at for you. So don't ever think that you're a failure for leaving school, taking time out and having to come back. It's absolutely fine. There's still plenty of time to decide and plenty of time to find your way. So we've got FE college. So this would be if you've left school with a minimum of GCSEs or qualifications before GCSEs, and you want to take a vocational subject. You might want to become a hairdresser. You might want to become a motor mechanic. You might want to work in catering. So this would be where you would apply to do your level 3 courses and above. So further education includes any study after secondary education that's not part of an undergraduate degree known as higher education. So an FE college or FE education is a type of education that you would study that's not part of a university degree. So you could do it straight away from leaving school, or you could do it to retrain and reskill. So courses range from basic English to higher national diplomas, technical and applied qualifications, and so on. It depends on what you need. So if you wanted to retrain and become a bricklayer, for example, you might start off with a level 2 technical certificate and progress up to a level 3 BTEC in bricklaying and go from there. Now, with funding, being that you're a slightly older learner, and I hate the term geriatric learner, but I had that one thrown at me a few times. Most of your courses, if you've not taken a level 3 course before, or it's your first qualification to a GCSE or an A-level standard, you wouldn't have to pay for tuition for it until you're 24 and under. If you get to 25, you've got, again, an education and care plan put in place, you might be able to still apply for tuition for that. But past then, you may have to find some funding for that for yourself. Things might change when it comes to this aspect, just because that we are now implementing within government a national re-skilling scheme where people can reskill and retrain, and it's not going to cost them as much as it would do if they had to do it themselves, if at all. So that's the funding is very likely to change over the next few years. We're not quite sure when that national retraining scheme is going to come into place for most people, but it's looking like it might be 2022 or 2023 onwards. So you might be able to get help for your courses, depending if you're on a low income. So you might get help to pay for the course, for living costs, for childcare. But the funding that you might have to apply for would possibly be student finance funding. Again, you'd have to contact your course provider to double check how they'd want their courses paid for and what support's available. So you can get free training if you're claiming job seekers allowance, if you're in the employment and support allowance work related activity group, or if you're required to do so as part of your universal credit claim. So if you're unemployed and it's your first course, you could get that for free if you're in receipt of any of those benefits. And if you're not in receipt of those benefits, but you're claiming other ones and you can't get free training, your college or your training provider would help you with that. They'd be able to tell you where to go, how to apply for funding, and so on, more so than myself, because there's hundreds of providers out there ready to help you. So returning back to university can be quite daunting. If you progress back to university post the age of 21, you'll be known as a mature student, which is an awful thing to say to someone. But you're mature, you've learnt more, you're ready to tackle university now. So being that you're slightly older, you might have a few more issues when it comes to attending full-time university or living on campus. It might be that you've already got a family. It might be that you're already working. So sometimes returning to university for a full-time degree isn't manageable for you. And again, that's fine. You can find out whether that particular university does part-time degrees, whether you can do the same degree via distance learning, so you can still work from home. It's dependent on you. So doing, again, a bit more research about whether returning to university is viable for you, that you've got the funding for it, you've got the childcare in place, you've got carers for any people that you care for put in place. That's all in place, then that's absolutely fine. You can do the research and find out the costings for it. So there are flexible and part-time courses, but you'd apply generally to the university or college that you're applying for that. So if you were applying to university, again, as a mature student, there's nothing wrong with that. You follow the same process as you would do if you were leaving school for the first time. So you'd apply through UCAS, you'd pay for an application, you would write a personal statement, you would write down all of your courses that you've studied, all of your experience, and you would submit that to the university at the same deadlines as other students. And UCAS can tell you some of those deadlines. I believe that the deadlines for something like medicine or veterinary science is around about October-ish normally, and the regular degrees, everything else, is normally middle of January, but they have changed because of COVID. So do the research there and check you've got the dates in for the right times. Universities can accept late applications, but because it's so competitive, if you're not in on time, they sometimes don't even just look at your application at all. It goes straight to the rejected pile. So make sure you follow those deadlines. So your entry requirements to university are normally A-levels, but they do accept access to higher education diplomas for students that left education without getting qualifications that they need. So they do accept BTECs as well and foundation courses. So if you did a foundation year and left and returned, you can use that in your application to return to university. And as I mentioned, those MVQs, BTECs, other work-related qualifications, apprenticeships, but make sure that you speak to the university directly and their admissions team to see whether your qualifications there would be accepted. 9 times out of 10 they are, but just to make sure and put your mind at rest that they'll accept those qualifications. So fees and funding, so like going to normal university, I say normal university, if going to university after the age of at the age of 18, you'll still be available or still have access to student funding. So you can still apply for student finance. If you're a mature learner, you might get some other incentives to retrain. So you might get a childcare grant or parent learning allowances to help pay for them. And also researching scholarships, mature student scholarships can be quite useful as well, to be granted extra money for training. So finding ways of saving money while studying for your degree, making sure that you take as much of the discounts, student discounts as you can, is a real must. Make sure you apply for student cards and you'll get discounts regardless of age. So thank you so much for attending this webinar and listening to me speak about all of your possible career options. As I say, this is the first of 6 career advice sessions that you've got available. We'd ask you to complete a feedback form. The link's found here. So if you could complete that and let us know how we're getting on, how you feel post the webinar, that's fantastic. And if you want to find out more about our events, if you want to apply for more of our events or hear more about our webinars, we've got an Eventbrite page here that you can apply for, and you can join us for one-on-ones or attend more of our sessions. We're going to be looking at things like CVs, we're going to be looking at interview techniques, UCAS, everything that you need. And if there's anything that you feel like you would need, you can just send that to us in that feedback form and we'll make sure that's provided for you. So again, thank you so much for listening and we look forward to working with you soon.